The year was 1894. Fog rolled endlessly across the marshlands of Savannah, Georgia, whispering secrets through the pines, and hidden deep within that mist stood St. Mary's Convent, a towering, Gothic structure that cast long shadows over the graves of its forgotten. To the villagers, St. Mary's was sacred ground, but beneath their prayers, there was fear, a fear of the lights seen flickering through its chapel, windows long after midnight, and the haunting bells that sometimes rang when no one pulled their ropes. They said the convent had secrets, but no one dared speak of them aloud. That autumn, a young nun named Sister Agnes Moreau arrived from Boston. She was quiet, pale, and fragile, seeking peace after the tragic loss of her brother, who had drowned under mysterious circumstances. But from the moment she crossed those iron gates, peace became the last thing she would ever know. The other sisters greeted her with forced smiles, their eyes hollow, movements synchronized like puppets on invisible strings. Meals were taken in silence. Prayer was not devotion here, and it was obedience. Agnes felt it from the very first night. Something in this place watched her, something older than the convent itself. Her room was small, a wooden cross above the bed, a cracked mirror and a single candle that flickered without wind. Every night as she knelt to pray, she heard footsteps in the corridor, slow, heavy, measured, and they always stopped, right outside her door. One night, unable to bear the tension, she opened it. The hall was empty, except for a faint humming sound coming from beneath the chapel floor. When she pressed her ear to the stone tiles, she heard whispers, a chant in Latin, and then a scream. The next morning, when she asked Mother Superior Helena about it, the reply was cold and final. Curiosity, my child, is the path to damnation. Days passed. Agnes tried to focus on her duties, tending the garden, cleaning relics, reciting the rosary, but the silence grew heavier, pressing on her chest like a weight. Then one morning during Mass she noticed something strange, though an empty pew. Sister Ruth, whispered one of the nuns. She's gone. Her room was untouched, her bed neatly made, and in the center her rosary, beads arranged in the shape of a circle, with the crucifix turned upside down. Mother Superior called it divine departure. But Agnes wasn't fooled. Whatever haunted this convent had taken Sister Ruth, and it was still hungry. That night Agnes dreamed of her brother, his hands reaching from beneath dark water, his voice echoing, "They will drown you too." She awoke gasping, sweat running cold down her neck. Outside her window the fog had thickened, and for the first time she saw it clearly. A figure standing in the courtyard draped in a nun's habit, but its face was not human. The days at St. Mary's Convent began to blend into one another. Same prayers, same meals, same silence. But beneath the routine, fear started to crawl. After Sister Ruth's disappearance, a strange tension filled the air. The nuns spoke even less, and the bells that usually rang for morning Mass fell silent. No one dared ask why. Sister Agnes began to notice the walls. Yes, the walls seemed to whisper. When the candles burned low, faint voices seeped through the cracks, chanting in languages long forgotten. Sometimes she thought she heard her own name. She told herself it was her imagination. Until one evening she found muddy footprints leading from the chapel door, prints that stopped right outside her room. That night Agnes couldn't sleep. She clutched her rosary tight and whispered a prayer, but her candle flickered and died before she could finish. Then came the knocking. 3 slow knocks, then silence, and from the hallway, a soft humming, like a lullaby. She opened the door, her hands trembling. The hallway stretched into blackness, but halfway down, she saw a shadow, a woman's silhouette in a nun's habit. "Sister Ruth?" Agnes whispered. The figure turned slowly, its face pale and stretched, eyes hollow as if carved from wax. It smiled, but the mouth tore too wide. Agnes screamed, and the figure vanished into smoke. By morning, Agnes was feverish. She went to Mother Superior Helena, desperate for answers, but Helena's eyes were cold and empty, like she already knew. "The Lord tests us through fear," she said quietly. "We must not speak of what we see." Agnes wanted to scream. She wanted to leave. But the iron gates were locked. And when she asked the groundskeeper, he told her something that froze her blood. "No one's left this place in 20 years, sister." That night, 2 more nuns disappeared. Their rooms were spotless, beds untouched, candles burned to the base. All that remained were symbols scratched into the stone floors, circles within circles drawn in dried blood. Agnes began to keep notes, tiny scraps of paper hidden under her mattress. She wrote what she saw, what she heard, what she felt. The convent was alive, feeding on them, drawing energy from their prayers, their fear, their faith. And she realized something even worse. Mother Superior wasn't afraid of the hauntings. She worshipped them. During midnight prayers, Agnes spied through the chapel door. Helena kneeling before the altar, chanting in Latin, surrounded by black candles and ancient relics that glowed faintly red. And behind her, the shadow of something tall, cloaked and moving. The next morning, Helena summoned Agnes, her voice calm but commanding. "You've seen too much, my child." She led her to the crypt, a staircase spiraling into the dark beneath the convent. The air smelled of iron and salt. Faint whispers echoed below. "What's down there?" Helena smiled softly. "Salvation." As the heavy door shut behind them, Agnes realized she might never see the light of day again. And somewhere in the darkness, she heard the same voice from her dreams, her brother's voice, whispering, "Run." The air beneath St. Mary's Convent was colder than the grave. Sister Agnes descended the spiral steps, her trembling hands clutching a lantern. Each step echoed like a heartbeat and slow, heavy, doomed. As the light flickered, she saw carvings on the walls, symbols of eyes, wings and hands reaching upward. They weren't Christian. They were ancient, older than the convent itself. She heard voices below, whispers in Latin that turned into soft, rhythmic chanting. The sound grew louder until it filled her ears like thunder. Then, the crypt opened into a vast underground chamber, stone walls lined with skulls, a massive cross inverted in the center, and Mother Superior Helena standing before it in black robes. Helena turned to her, her face calm, eyes burning like embers. "Welcome, Sister Agnes," she said. "You have been chosen." Agnes stepped back, her voice breaking. "Chosen for what?" Helena smiled. "For truth." She lifted her arms, and the other nuns, the missing ones, stepped forward from the shadows. Their faces were pale, their eyes lifeless, mouths whispering the same chant over and over again. Dominus Tenebrarum, the Lord of Shadows. Agnes's breath caught in her throat. They weren't alive. They were hollow, vessels drained of souls, puppets bound by faith turned into chains. Agnes dropped her rosary and ran, but the walls seemed to close around her. Every passage twisted into another, every door sealed with the same bloody symbol, the circle within a circle. She stumbled into a smaller chamber lit only by a single candle. On a stone altar lay an open book, its pages made of what looked like skin. Her brother's name was written inside. Her hands shook as she read the last line aloud. "Sacrifice of the bloodline binds the soul forever." A sudden sound, footsteps behind her. She turned. Helena stood there holding a silver blade. "Your brother was the first offering," she whispered. "Now you will be the last." Helena raised the blade, chanting the ancient words. Agnes screamed and grabbed the candle, throwing it at her. The wax and flame splashed across Helena's robe. Fire erupted, licking the air with orange fury. The other nuns began to shriek, their hollow voices echoing through the crypt as their bodies convulsed, turning into black smoke. The ground trembled, and the inverted cross split down the middle, releasing a roar that was not human. Agnes ran through the collapsing corridor, clutching the book to her chest. Behind her, Helena's voice echoed, no longer human, no longer holy. "You cannot run from faith, child. It's already inside you." Agnes burst through the chapel floor, gasping for air. The night outside was black and thick with fog. She ran through the courtyard barefoot, her habit torn, her heart pounding like thunder. When she looked back, the convent stood silent, no fire. No screams, only the sound of the chapel bell, ringing on its own. She thought she had escaped. But as she reached the main gate, she found it wide open, and standing just beyond it was her brother. He smiled gently. "You made it, Agnes." But his eyes were black. The lantern flickered. The fog thickened, and St. Mary's Convent vanished behind her, swallowed whole by the night. As Father Gabriel descended deeper into the convent's basement, the air grew colder. He followed the faint sound of prayers echoing through the stone walls. Each step he took brought him closer to the truth the church had buried for decades. At the end of the corridor, he found a heavy wooden door covered in Latin inscriptions. He hesitated, but something inside called him. When he pushed it open, a wave of cold air rushed out, and the flickering candle nearly went out. Inside, he discovered a hidden crypt. There, the missing nuns lay peacefully, their rosaries clutched tightly, their faces calm yet sorrowful. It looked less like a murder scene and more like a ritual, a sacred sacrifice. Near the remains, Gabriel found a small diary wrapped in cloth. The pages were fragile, but one sentence stood out. "We sealed ourselves away to protect the world from the evil we awakened." As Gabriel read the final lines, the air trembled. He heard faint whispers, dozens of voices praying in unison. He dropped the candle and looked around. But no one was there. Only shadows moving against the walls. The next morning, the police sealed the convent again. But locals say, if you pass by St. Mary's at midnight, you can still hear those prayers, echoing from beneath the chapel, as if the nuns never truly left. Their silence wasn't a curse. It was a promise to guard St. Mary's forever. 50 years later, St. Mary's stood abandoned, vines crawling up its walls, its bells long silent. But in 2025, a team of paranormal investigators arrived to uncover the truth behind the nuns' disappearance. They called themselves the Order Seekers. The team set up their equipment, EMF meters, night vision cameras, and spirit boxes. As the sun set, they began hearing faint whispers, the same Latin prayers the villagers once spoke of. Every sound was recorded, every shadow captured. At midnight, one of them, Sarah, noticed movement near the chapel door. When she turned, a figure dressed as a nun stood behind her, her face pale and hollow. Before Sarah could scream, the figure vanished into thin air. Moments later, their cameras malfunctioned. The recordings glitched, showing brief flashes of the crypt, of the buried nuns, of Father Gabriel's diary. It was as if the convent was showing them what truly happened. The team followed the trail to the underground crypt. There, on the cold stone floor, they found the same diary, but with new words written inside. "They're not gone. We are watching." Panic spread through the team. One by one, they rushed to the exit. But the convent's main door had sealed shut. Just like it did 50 years ago, the chanting grew louder, unbearable, divine yet horrifying. When morning came, the villagers found their van still parked outside. Inside the convent, there was no one. Only the sound of quiet prayers, and the diary lying open at the altar. Till this day, no one dares to enter St. Mary's, but those who pass by at night swear they can see flashlights moving inside, and hear whispers saying, "Forgive us for what we awakened." 3 days after the investigators vanished, a priest from the nearby parish came to cleanse St. Mary's. He carried holy water, a silver cross, and the diary the team had left behind. When he opened it, the ink began to bleed, forming new words. "We broke the vow." The diary revealed a secret hidden for centuries. The nuns weren't victims, they were keepers. In 1858, they had imprisoned an ancient demon disguised as a nun, a being born of sin and pain, a creature that fed on confession and guilt. Father Gabriel, the convent's leader, had fallen in love with that entity. His obsession weakened the seal that bound it. The disappearances, the screams, the endless prayers, all were failed attempts to contain the curse once it escaped. The priest trembled as the chapel air turned cold. Whispers circled him, voices of the vanished nuns chanting from unseen places. And then standing behind the altar, she appeared. The same hollow-eyed figure wearing the torn habit of St. Mary's. The priest raised his cross, shouting the final exorcism. The walls shook, dust fell from the ceiling, and the floor split open, revealing the bones of the real nuns buried beneath. Their souls rose as light circling the entity, dragging it back into darkness. When the silence returned, the convent stood still once more. Only the diary remained, now burned at the edges, its final line visible. Sin repeats when truth is buried. Years later, the site was rebuilt into a boarding school. Students claimed they sometimes saw a woman in black praying alone in the chapel. No one dared speak to her. And when the lights flicker at midnight, they say the nuns of St. Mary's are still keeping watch, guarding the curse they once released. And so the legend of St. Mary's Convent lives on, a tale of devotion turned to obsession, faith turned to fear, and a sin that refused to stay buried.